Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 153, Saturday, August the 5th, 2017. Thank you so much for tuning in. Much to get to today, so let's get right to it. I'm going to be providing a link for you to a video, and this video is with Barack Obama. It was his last press conference, his very last press conference. And in his last press conference, as you will see on the video, in the link I'm going to provide for you, that he refers to the DNC emails as emails that were leaked. Emails that were leaked. Again, I will provide the link to that video if you would like to watch it. It's about an 8.5-minute video, and you will see in there in Obama's very last press conference that when he refers to the DNC emails, he says they were leaked, not hacked. Said nothing about the Russians. He said they were leaked. Now, some people are saying, well, that was just a Freudian slip. He made a mistake. I don't think so. I think Barack Obama knows that those emails were leaked. And my guess is he knows who the leaker was. Congress has gone on vacation after doing and accomplishing absolutely nothing besides standing down and participating in a deep state coup against the president. Now, Congress actually, if you look at the Republican calendar, you will see that they still show 12 days of activities that are supposed to be taking place in the month of August. But it doesn't appear that they're going to keep that schedule, because we're getting word now that many of them have already left the District of Criminals, and that they're taking off, they're leaving, and they're not coming back until after Labor Day. Despite the fact that they have not been able to succeed in coming up with a bill to replace Obamacare. They can't find the votes for repeal, fat, skinny, or otherwise. And of course, they have not been able to do anything on tax reform. They're now talking about the 15%. They don't think they can get that done. So now they're talking about maybe 20 or 23%. Well, what's the freaking point? And of course, we know that they're openly working against the president, making sure that his legislative agenda fails, so that on top of everything else, they can say he's a failure as a president because he can't move forward his legislative agenda. Even though he's sitting there with pen in hand, he's already laid out the parameters for what he would like to see. He's willing to negotiate and compromise. He already has on the health care bill on a half a dozen different things that have been put towards him. He said, yeah, we can work on that, we can do this, or whatever. He's made every effort in the world to try to get one of these harebrained schemes that they keep trying to jam down our throat. He's been willing to work with him on all of these. The Congress is where the failure is, and it's not an accident. So that means that in the District of Criminals, for the politicians who go and take their summer recess, it appears they're going to go a little early and leave unfinished work on the table. But what that means is that they'll be going back to their districts, having to leave their mistresses in D.C., having to leave their friends in the Georgetown cocktail parties, having to leave their friends in the media who they leak stories to, having to leave their friends who are the lobbyists on K Street, and all the others of the swamp, having to go back to their districts, which they hate doing. Now, most of them are going to go back to their districts, grab their luggage, grab the wife and kids that they have to tolerate for a couple weeks a year, and they're going to head ass out as far as they can go to the Bahamas, the Caribbean, or somewhere to get the hell out of their districts. Normally, they would do a lot of fundraising during this time. They would also have these town halls where they try to get back in touch with their constituents in their districts and find out what is on their minds. Of course, they're not really interested in what's on their constituents' minds. They know exactly what is on their minds, believe me. And also, we've seen a trend in the last 6 or 8 months, but it's actually been going on since the elections of last year, which is that we've now seen where groups are organizing and taking advantage of these town halls. So many of these town halls and many of these districts, you're hearing a lot of these Congress members say that they will not be having their town halls. And they talk about security risk and various things. Now, you can be assured the ones that do have these town halls will have heightened security, because what we have going on is that we have an effort underway by the progressive movement, the Antifa crowd specifically, and George Soros-funded left-wing groups, whose plan is to go to these so-called Republican or conservative members of Congress, to go to their town halls and cause problems, to take over the town halls, to create chaos and problems. Now, that has prompted pro-Trump people to want to go to the town halls to try to stand up to the Soros-funded folks and the Antifa folks, to stand up to them and try to counterbalance them. And of course, then you have the regular folks, many of whom are just regular folks who just want to go to the town hall because they have some questions. And of course, you also always have all the organizations which send their people there to participate and do the things that they like to do, such as the Chamber of Commerce will have people who will go to these town halls and make sure that they keep their congressmen on the straight and narrow, on the establishment path. So you have these competing groups wanting to go to these town halls, and it looks like they all want to try to be involved in some political action, which could turn the entire town hall process into just a big food fight. And of course, the members of Congress are concerned for their security, their well-being, and they don't think that they can actually get anything accomplished. So you're going to see a lot of these town halls are not going to happen. So voters, regular people who the town halls were designed for, are not going to get their chance to go to the town halls and ask their questions or let their concerns be brought to the attention of their representative. You're going to see this falling away more and more as time goes on. These town halls will become a thing of the past, and that's probably the entire purpose of the exercise. Remember who's behind it. So there you go. Here's another story, very interesting. In an email exchange that's been leaked by someone, and I assume it may have been Mr. Budowski himself, and for those of you who don't know who I'm talking about Mr. Budowski, who is a Fox News producer and who has really been one of those people that have been on the Seth Rich story. He's the one that got in contact with Rob Wheeler and brought Rob Wheeler to Fox News to discuss the Seth Rich stuff. And then, of course, he apparently is now being sued by Rob Wheeler, and Rob Wheeler is suing Fox News and Budowski because they're claiming that Budowski has assigned responsibility for making statements, saying Rob Wheeler made statements that Rob Wheeler backed down from. And of course, Rob Wheeler is saying he didn't back down from anything. He's saying that Fox News edited the video to make it look like he said something that he didn't say, or backed down from something that he did say that he's not backing down from. So, Mr. Budowski has this ongoing legal issue, he and Fox News, against Mr. Wheeler. But it appears that back in June, Ed Budowski had an email exchange with Seymour Hersh, because he had learned about what Seymour Hersh knew, which we have just learned here in the last few days. And he was urging in the email, which you can read, the email's public, it's all over the place, the email conversation between Ed Budowski and Seymour Hersh is with Budowski urging Hersh to go public with what he knows about Seth Rich. Of course, Hersh has recently stated on a radio interview that his high-level FBI source has seen the Seth Rich FBI file, and that Rich did send info to WikiLeaks. And after Rich's death, which happened on July 10th of 2016, after the death of Seth Rich, no more materials were actually sent to WikiLeaks. And according to Seymour Hersh, the last data transfer from Seth Rich to WikiLeaks or to a third-party Dropbox that was set up between them. The final transmission was done on May the 23rd, which would have been, of course, about 2.5 weeks before Seth Rich was murdered. But what's very interesting about this email is that Seymour Hersh, first of all, takes Butowski to task over some statement that he's alleging. Seymour Hersh saying, "Hey, you're saying that I said this. I didn't say that. You're misrepresenting what I said." Then Butowski takes issue with that and says, no, I have a good memory. In our conversation, you said this, and he reiterates what he believes what Seymour Hersh told him. So they have a little back and forth about what was actually said and what was alleged to have been said. But then you see that Seymour Hersh, basically the gist of the conversation is that Seymour Hersh clearly has absolutely no interest, zero interest in appearing on Fox News. He has zero interest in dealing with Mr. Butowski. He has zero interest in talking to any of the corporate media. And this is what I mean about Seymour Hersh. Seymour Hersh knows he is a very credible person. He knows he has this reputation. He is not going to destroy it by getting involved in the corporate media propaganda that's going on, regardless of which side of the aisle it's coming from, and regardless of whether or not there may be some truth in what they're talking about. Again, he just does not trust the corporate media. And it's funny that I read a lot of Seymour Hersh's pieces. He does write a lot of things that get picked up. I read a lot of his stuff on Information Clearinghouse, but his stories get picked up and by a lot of independent media organizations, particularly on the internet. But you can see that in many years now, the corporate media has had no interest in Seymour Hersh about the many important stories that he has done. It's only on certain times when they'll actually reach out to him. He's quite aware of this. He also understands the dangerous game that can be played. He also understands that the corporate media has no credibility, and to associate himself with them would only be detrimental to his credibility. So you can see that in the email exchange, he's basically telling Mr. Butowski to stop making up things that he said that aren't true, and he's also letting Mr. Butowski know that he'll talk about the Seth Rich story to the extent that he wants to whoever he wants to, and he'll exclude what he wants to. He'll do whatever the hell he wants, and he's not the slightest bit interested in having any business to do with Fox, with MSNBC, CNN, NBC, ABC, none of these people. Seymour Hersh divorced himself from the corporate media hacks a long time ago. He does not need them, and he does not want to get caught up in their bullshit. This is exactly what you get out of that email exchange, and it's quite interesting that it would be leaked. I doubt that Hersh leaked it, so I can only assume that Mr. Butowski leaked it. That's the best guess I can make, but it's a very interesting conversation that they're having, and the response from Seymour Hersh is exactly what you would expect. I'm very surprised Mr. Butowski thought that Hersh would deal with him at all, especially when they're caught up in this legal battle right now. Let's see. Well, it appears that Uncle Bob Mueller, the special counsel, and his posse, it looks like they're investigators, many of who are Department of Justice investigators, are worried that they're going to get sued. So, as is being reported in the Gateway Pundit, these DOJ lawyers who are working for Mueller have recently purchased liability insurance to guard themselves against potential retaliatory lawsuits which could be brought by the subjects that they are investigating as part of the Russia probe. And who are they talking about? They're talking about the president. They're talking about Jared Kushner. They're talking about Don Jr. They're talking about Mr. Manafort and Mr. Stone. They're talking about anyone who they might launch one of their attacks onto, which they know are going to be slanderous and libelous in nature, and could possibly be and result in a civil lawsuit being filed against them. So they're actually taking out insurance to protect themselves because they know that they're getting ready to do a hit job on the president and people around him. They know it's a bunch of lies and garbage, and they want to prepare themselves and be legally protected, financially protected for what they know will follow after they throw their lies and slanderous, libelous material at Trump and those around him. There you go. Attorney General Sessions and the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coats, did their little press conference, and they laid out a new aggressive strategy for curtailing leaks. They're going to triple the number of leak investigators. They've created a new unit within the FBI. Yes, the very people who are doing the leaking and doing all the protection involved in all the corruption, the people within the FBI to coordinate efforts. This coming to you from the Daily Caller. This is extraordinary. Mr. Sessions, Mr. Coates, you do not need 3 times the number of FBI investigators that you have now. Here's why. It's simple math. What have the current FBI investigators turned up, despite all the evidence that's been presented by independent media analysts, and including the criminals themselves? James Comey testified under oath and volunteered that he himself leaked. He's voluntarily stated that he leaked, in fact, classified information, conversations with the president, in order to bring about a special counselor, that would be you, Mr. Mueller, to bring down the president. There you go, Mr. Sessions. There you go, Mr. Coates. There's one of your leakers right there. And let's go back to the mathematical equation, Mr. Sessions. You want 3 times the number of FBI investigators. Well, how many leakers within the deep state have the current group of FBI investigators brought to justice? The answer is 0. 0. So if you bring in 3 times the number that you have now, then that mathematical equation would be 3 times 0. Well, 3 times 0 equal 0. 3 times 0 is 0, Mr. Sessions, Mr. Coates, tripling the number of FBI investigators when they are in fact at the very heart of these cover-ups. The FBI investigators should have already found the leaker and the unmasker of Michael Flynn's conversations. You have Mr. Comey testifying under oath that he in fact leaked classified information. You have Mr. Brennan admitting under oath that he did unmask. And therefore, we can assume he might have done some leaking. We have Loretta Lynch involved. You think she did some leaking, Mr. Sessions? There's plenty of evidence to suggest that she did. How about Susan Rice and Samantha Power, who we both now know did request surveillance and unmasking on Trump and his associates, and apparently many other people. We also know about the program Obama laid out in the weeks before he left office to make sure that all this information would be spread throughout the intelligence community. And we also have our good friend, remember her, Miss Vargas, who went on MSNBC and gave us the backstory, even though she wasn't involved and hadn't been involved in the administration in almost 2 years. She was one of the people that apparently was made aware that there was all this information that needed to get out there, that needed to be spread. You have tons and tons and tons of information. You have Mr. Montgomery's 47 hard drives. You have Sarah Carter and John Sullivan over there at Circa News. You have Larry Klayman. You have Tom Fitton from Freedom Watch. You have the ACLU files. You have all this overwhelming amount of information, Mr. Sessions and Mr. Coates. You do not need to triple the number of FBI investigators. There is a mountain of evidence that's already there. You just need to do something with it. 3 times 0 equals 0. You could put in 500 FBI investigators. Mr. Sessions, 500 times 0 still equals 0. As I have done several videos on foreign policy And as I have talked about the EU, and as I have mentioned several times in my videos, most of you know that while most people believe that the collapse of the EU or the breakup of the EU is going to be focused mainly on possibly the French having a Frexit, or the Netherlands leaving, the Nexit, or possibly Austria leaving. And I have been saying now for months that it is inevitable that there is going to be a breakup of the EU. But as I keep telling you, it's not going to start with the Western European countries. They will be lagging behind. Yes, it's possible that France could leave the EU when things get bad enough. It's possible that the Netherlands could. I think Austria is the most likely of those, which would be more the Western Europeans countries. But as I've been telling you, it's going to be Poland and the Czech Republic and the Baltic countries that are going to be saying so long to the EU. They will be leaving, and they will be the reason that the big crack up begins. It's going to start first in the former Eastern Bloc countries. They're going to be the ones that first leave the EU. That's where the major schism will occur, the major crack in the dam, and that will be what paves the way for eventually these other Western European countries to leave the EU and the breakup. This is not going to happen overnight, but this is moving in this direction. And once again, I'm watching very closely, and we can see that, as I reported to you about a month ago, the Poles are fed up. And it's the Polish citizens who are hitting the streets and telling their ruling party, get out. We want out of the EU. So Poland is now closer to leaving the EU. They refuse to meet the migrant quota set for them by the EU, and therefore they are being penalized. Penalties which I don't believe they're going to pay. They're also getting harassed by the EU for cutting down too many trees, or cutting down trees in somewhere where they're not supposed to. This is just a red herring, just another reason to go after Poland and put some more pressure on them. And the Polish ruling party there, and the majority of Polish citizens, are fed up. They're hitting the streets. I do expect that Poland will be the next country to leave the EU. It's just a matter of time. And of course, we know that when Donald Trump took his trip over to Europe, it was his meeting with the Polish president that went better than any of the other meetings he had. They got along very, very well. And you know that privately, Donald Trump probably told him, he said, hey, I know in the past 2 administrations would have really given you a lot of pressure, leaned on you hard if you tried to leave the EU. I know what's going on over here. I just want you to know, go ahead and leave the EU if you want to. I would actually pat you on the back. I may not be able to publicly go out and push for it. It's politically sensitive back in the States where I'm the president. But I can tell you, just between you and I, go ahead and do it if you want. I won't be putting any pressure on you at all. I'll apply no sanctions to you. I'll make no threats to you. I'll do nothing to do you any harm. If you and the citizens of your country want to leave the EU, go ahead. You have my blessing. And once Poland leaves, it will not take long. The Czech Republic will be right behind, and because those countries all stick together in their own little bloc, I expect a couple of the Baltic countries will leave as well. You could see Poland, and then you could see 5 to 6 more, those former Eastern Bloc countries, within a period of 2 years or less, join Poland, leaving the EU, creating the first major crack in the dam, and I believe that will lead to the eventual crack up of the EU. It may take 10, 20 years to happen, but it is inevitable. That's the direction things are moving. Also from the Daily Caller, Michael Batish. The Obama White House oversaw Election Day news. Dozens of FBI officials monitored social media on Election Day, and the FBI admits that they were walking a fine line by monitoring social media sites. Of course, this should not be a surprise to us. We all know that this was going on, and this was just one tiny little thing that was part of a much, much larger surveillance operation that was going on by Obama, by the Clintons, by the FBI, by the intelligence community. It wasn't just on Trump and his people. It was on political organizations. It was on YouTubers. It was on various groups in social media. And this is just one part of a much larger operation that was going on. And it just further feeds into the evidence that we already have that there was a major counterintelligence operation going on, but it wasn't being targeted at some foreign enemy. It was being targeted at the domestic enemy. That would be you and me, the president, his supporters, his staff, his team. And we know that media organizations, corporate media organizations, are up to their eyeballs in this. I'll have more on that in tomorrow's video because we have new information about that as well. If you think the media cannot lose any, if you think that they have any credibility left to lose, well, I hope they got a little left to lose because they just lost some more. And tomorrow we'll be going into that. As I mentioned to you 2 days ago in a video, the governor of Virginia, Jim Justice, appeared at a rousing Trump rally in West Virginia, where he came out and told the citizens of West Virginia, where he is the governor, that he is going to switch party affiliation from Democrat to Republican. And this came after he had a meeting with Donald Trump and talked about some of the economic things that he wants to do, regulation things he wants to do in West Virginia. And he found out that Trump was on board with a lot of things that will be good for the state of West Virginia, that he could never get the Democrats on board with. He couldn't get Obama. He couldn't even get Bush on board, nor very many establishment Republicans. But certainly he and Donald Trump see eye to eye on a lot of things that would be good for the state of West Virginia, as well as the fact that it's a state that Donald Trump turned red. Now there's another state that Donald Trump, which is kind of a swing state, Virginia, another state that Trump turned red, that was kind of bounced back and forth between blue and red, that was thought it was going to go for Hillary, that ended up going for Trump. And that is Senator Mark Warner. He is a Democratic senator from Virginia. He is now stating that Congress needs to investigate the disgraceful leaks of President Trump and the private conversations he had with world leaders. So now you have a Democrat Senator Mark Warner from Virginia. He's looking at the polls. He knows what's going on. He's broken from his party. And now instead of following the Trump-Russia collusion line, Democrat Senator Mark Warner of Virginia looks like he is joining the president's team, getting behind him and saying, yeah, these leaks are leaking the president's phone calls. We need to get to the bottom of that. And of course, we already know who one of the major players, if not the primary and maybe the only player on the congressional side that's involved in that, is Senator John Magoo. We know that he is the one who somehow is getting information from the intelligence community about these phone calls Trump is having with foreign leaders, and these leaks are coming via the intelligence community. Their pipeline is Senator Magoo, and Senator Magoo is now the guy who is most likely the primary scrutinizer and releasing this information. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster is thwarting President Donald Trump's foreign policy objectives, according to two former NSC officials, and they have given this information to the Daily Caller News Foundation. According to these two former NSC officials, everything that the president wants to do, McMaster opposes. McMaster wants to increase our amount of troops and activity in Afghanistan. Trump does not. Trump wants to get us out of the Syrian war. McMaster wants to go in. Trump wants to deal with the Islam issue. McMaster does not. In fact, he will not even use the words radical Islamic terror. Trump wants to rework the Iran deal. McMaster does not. McMaster, the disaster, is getting rid of Trump loyalists, those that support his foreign policy agenda, without telling Trump. As I've said once before, twice before, 3 times before, a dozen times before, McMaster needs to go, Mr. President. I know you came out and made a statement on this week because you know me and other people are calling for that. I know that you've given Mr. McMaster your support. I think you're making a mistake. Keep watching very closely, Mr. President, and I'll keep you up to date as to the ongoing behavior and actions of Mr. McMaster, the disaster. He needs to go. Also, another guy we need to pay real close attention to, probably the leading reporter in the country following the M1 Awan story. He's actually been on this story for a very long time. You can go back and look at things he was writing on this back in the spring of last year. So Rosiak is all over this. He was on Hannity's show twice last week, and he is stating that on May 18th, which we all saw the video, on May 18th, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Debbie Blabbermouth, do anything for Hillary, Wasserman Schultz, threatened Chief of Capitol Police with consequences if he did not return her laptop. Well, this past Thursday, Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz now states that the computer was not hers. That's the computer in question. And she said that she had never seen or used it and doesn't know what's on it. She says it was Awan's, but that it was paid for by the taxpayers. Now, Debbie Wasserman Schultz says that she is allowing the Capitol Hill Police to examine the laptop after blocking it for weeks. But her lawyer is negotiating over the access, over what they will allow them to look at. Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz says Awan filled out a form for unpaid leave before going on vacation. This is clearly a CYA moment. The problem with that is, according to Mr. Rosiak, who's investigated this going back a long way, has stated that he has looked at the pay records for the Awans, and despite he and his brothers and their wives taking many trips abroad and being gone for periods of time, up to weeks and months, that never before had they ever cut off their pay. They've always gotten paid. So if you believe Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz saying that they had filled out a form to so that they wouldn't be paid while they were going back to Pakistan, you can assume that she is lying, which is all Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz does, is lie. I'm sure they got a piece of paperwork that they can produce that they probably just filled out a week ago and put in the dates accordingly. I don't think it's going to stand up, and I don't think Debbie Wasserman Schultz is going to have much of a leg to stand on. There's a lot of smoke here. If there was any interest whatsoever by the Congress in getting to the bottom of this, they would find a lot of things here, and this Awan investigation, if ever followed through, is going to find its way and having connections to Seth Rich. You can be assured of that. And we have, of course, more on Seth Rich, which I'll be covering in tomorrow and Monday's video as well. So this is what we have. This is Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She knows she's in a world of trouble if, in fact, there's any intent made to get to the bottom of things. Now, this idea that she's allowing the Capitol Police to look at the computer, her attorney's negotiating what access they can have, this is a joke. The FBI has already now intervened in this investigation, and my guess is they've probably got that computer, and the FBI will not be interested in Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz's attorney coming in and negotiating access. The FBI gets into that damn computer, they're going to look at whatever they want to look at. We also know from the Seth Rich investigation that the Capitol Hill Police nor the Washington, D.C. Metro Police, according to their own detective, who we'll be talking more about tomorrow, their own detective stated that when they got a hold of Rich's computer, they didn't have the technical ability there at the Metro Police in D.C. to get to the data that they wanted to look at, that they had to call in some really serious experts. That was the FBI. That's when the FBI came in and took a look, and that's how they created the FBI file that Seymour Hersh is referring to. It was because the Metro Police called the FBI and said, hey, we don't have the skills to know how to get into the root of the hard drive on this particular system. Would you come and assist us? And they did. So the FBI, it's not like they have a lack of evidence to look at. It's not like they have any problem with that. The only thing they have a lack of is a lack of motivation, a lack of interest to look into the evidence that they're holding. That is a question that we need to be asking, is why? That's a question we ask every day here on TowerGate. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for commenting on my videos, giving me thumbs up. I do appreciate each and every one of you. This has been day 153, TowerGate, Saturday, August the 5th, 2017. I'm headed out to do some grilling. We're going to grill some burgers and chicken. Then we're going to watch some movies. That's what we're going to do. It's movie night. Thank you very much. You all enjoy your Saturday evening. I look forward to being back with you tomorrow. Take care.